because there's a bout of flu going around in the community, and we don't want any outsiders coming into the seniors' home. And we're fine with that. So what we do is, okay, we'll go to the library or we'll go to a restaurant. We understand that they want to protect their population in that seniors' home, which makes sense. We're not letting anybody in. We don't want to infect our residents. Please come back in 2 weeks if the situation has changed. Right. That's how you deal with it.
Exactly. So it's targeted. Mm-hmm. It deals with the problem where the problems are. And then you don't have to find all of these loopholes and exemptions, etc. So this is, again, what the response to the government has been to allow, no disrespect to doctors. They're just trying to do their best as well.
Right.
But what are the chief medical health officer of health? And I've always found that to be a strange title, right? Because if you're the chief medical officer, you're the chief medical officer of health, aren't you? You're not the chief medical officer of, but in this case, you've been the chief medical officer of car dealerships too.
Right.
And you know nothing about car dealerships, right? So you're imposing all of these restrictions on people, and then a lot of them don't make sense. So the government now gets under a lot of pressure to make all of these changes, the loopholes and adjustments, etc. Number one. And number two, the really big problem for the government is that they don't make sense and they can't be enforced, so people don't follow them. So if I go to a grocery store, it makes sense. Whether Nick agrees with me or not, I could see some sense in wearing a mask. Okay?
Right.
I hear the arguments against the mask, but I weigh them and I go, okay, yeah, but still I could see some sense. All right? Notwithstanding my opinion of the efficiency of them. So I wear a mask. I do it willingly, okay? If I wasn't willing to wear a mask, I probably wouldn't wear one, which is what people are doing, okay? Mm-hmm. I may not be able to go to work because my office is shut down, because the government has shut down the offices, okay? Or the government has shut down these stores. So I can't go to that store, so what am I going to do? Well, I'll end up going, more of us are going to go to Costco or Walmart, as you said, because you create that sort of Venturi effect, right?
Right.
Or I'm just going to find something else to do. So I'm going to go to walking on the nature trails or whatever,
yeah.
or whatever. I'm going to find something else to do that's going to end up defying the law.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because
unfortunately,
go
ahead. I was just going to say, unfortunately, let's assume for a minute that the government took this seriously. Okay, they don't, and I think that there's plenty of evidence to support that argument. But assuming that they did, now I had a thought and it's gone.
I was going to jump in. While you're getting your thought back, Nick, I'm looking at the situation in Florida once again, where you're a business person in Florida, and at least like Florida is open for business. They have COVID cases in Florida, and I'm sure that their hospitals are at capacity. Their ICU units are pretty full right now. But you have to balance that between the well-being of the entire population. How many people, like I was going into stores and businesses down there, and it's like businesses that would have been closed up here. What does that do to someone who's put 20, 30, maybe 40 years of sweat equity into their business, and then you tell them that they can't open? You've got to have balance in life, in everything. And
well, the one thing they don't do is get a good job handle on balancing. I mean, again, I go back to the idea of do what I say, not what I do, right? The hypocrisy of it all. That wears on people. And there are consequences beyond the economic that we're going to end up living with for years, all in the mental health and family situations and, sexual assaults and suicides. All kinds of things are going to come out of this that are unintended consequences.
I heard something.
Go ahead.
I heard something very sad. I heard an interview on the radio this morning, and the gentleman was talking to the host saying that there is an increase in child abuse of young kids during this pandemic, last year of pandemic. I mean, that's heartbreaking. The media doesn't talk about that very much, but it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw the story too.
The other thing they don't talk about is how many people have been cured. The only place I ever find that number is on a news website that I frequent. And they'll list the number of infected, the number of people who have the virus, those who have been cured of it, and then the death rate. How many people have died? In other words, they present the information backwards. They should say, okay, this many people died, but look how many people recovered. Is the glass half full, half empty? I prefer to look at it as half full. Of 100,000 people, we've had 99,998 live through this, no problem at all. And those the handful who did get it, two of them were elderly and died.
Yeah.
So, they don't present it. They present it in such a way. There's an adage in the newspaper industry: if it bleeds, it leads, and that translates over into these terror. Because people want to be frightened. They love to be frightened. My wife loves to go on roller coasters and just be scared to death. I have no time for them because I don't want to go through that. Put me in an airplane where I'm flying and it's like a roller coaster, I'm fine. She's terrified because I'm flying.
You're only saying that, Nick, because you've experienced the North Atlantic storm for 2 days, which is like, okay, let me off this roller coaster already.
Yeah. I've had enough. That my wife sitting right beside me.
Please, let me off.
Yeah. But let's not forget, in 1969, they had the Hong Kong flu. It started in 1968 and it went into 1969. 100,000 Americans died during the Hong Kong flu that season, and about 1 million people worldwide. So maybe not quite as devastating as the COVID-19, but still, 100,000 people in the States, that's a lot of people. But they didn't shut down their economy for that.
Well, I have to say, the stupidest thing that I heard in the last week, absolutely the most insane, idiotic thing that I've heard, this will please you, Nick, came from our Prime Minister, okay? I have to say this.
Surprise!
Where his standard of this was, there aren't a lot of people, when we're talking about the restrictions coming back into the country if you're coming from outside the country. His standard was, he said, words to this effect: there aren't a lot of people that are bringing infection into Canada, but if even one is, one is too many. One person is too many. And I'm thinking, okay, first of all, that's an impossible standard. But just think of the message that you're giving to people. Mm-hmm. I mean, you cannot. What do you mean one is too many? If one person dies of a heart attack, that's one too many. I mean, I know what I'm saying sounds unsympathetic, no compassion, all of that stuff. But the reality is, okay, people, there's this virus, and people are getting sick, and people are dying. And to paraphrase Henry Blake in MASH, who was one of my favorite characters, okay, in a pandemic, people get sick. Rule number one is people get sick and people die. Mm-hmm. Rule number two is governments and doctors can't change rule number one.
Right.
Okay, that's newsflash. We're human beings. We're vulnerable to these little microscopic bugs. We do our best, and so I tell people, it's serious. Take it seriously.
Yes.
Take sensible, responsible action to protect yourself and other people around you. But don't panic, and accept the fact that people are going to get sick, and people are going to die. Just like people have cancer, people have the flu and die. Nobody gets polio anymore, I guess, and nobody gets smallpox either. Okay. But people still get the bubonic plague.
Yeah.
People still get leprosy.
That's right.
And it's not fun. It's not nice. But, we don't live in an antiseptic world. And really, I wonder whether or not, you're talking about the Hong Kong flu, Chris, but I'm wondering whether or not, if this was 1969, if our attitude towards this socially would be different. Because it's just, I can't help but think that a certain element of our panic over this whole thing has been predicated on the fact that we've become a snowflake society.
Yeah.
A snowflake society. The minute the heat is on, we melt. And so we have this idea that we should never be exposed to any kind of adversity. And if there's adversity, my gosh, slam on the brakes and break out the cocoons.
Yeah, I'm all for cleanliness, by the way, but what is all this sanitizing doing to us? It's probably here. We're not going to have any type of immune system left after all this sanitizing.
Nothing. There was a study done a few years ago. Actually, it was done in Ottawa. And my wife and I were driving in New York State at the time, and they had done a study where they were looking at just the difference between hand sanitizer and just washing your hands with soap and water.
Right.
And the soap and water turned out to be more effective than the hand sanitizer. So, but there it is. What are you going to do? Nick, you're quiet over there. We're going to have to go for a break in a minute there, Nick. Give us some final thoughts on the topic.
Well, okay. The bottom line is the government has, even now, it's got too much political capital built into bad ideas. And it's the same thing. They're in the same position as David Suzuki is when it comes to global warming. He can never admit he's wrong, because the moment he does, he has to completely reshape his worldview, and they don't want to do that. So what they're doing now is they're hanging on to bad ideas because they'll lose face. And that, I think, is the mark of a very weak, small-minded leadership. If you can't admit that you've made a mistake, you've got no business being in the leadership position, because that's the number one rule of leaders. They make mistakes. And it doesn't matter in what field of endeavor you're in. Those who are running the show are going to get it wrong once in a while. And a lot of times, in many cases, a lot of times. Look at how many times Edison got it wrong with the light bulb. Right? That's just one example. It was 1,049 times or something. Anyway, he just kept trying it a different way. Now, what we have now is a situation where people don't have the internal fortitude and confidence in themselves to stand up and say, I'm human, I made a mistake, this is my fault, but here's what we're going to do to fix it.
All right.
Because that person would be elected forever.
All right. And with that, Nick, we're going to have to go for a break. We're just running a little bit over time here. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to the live show, stay put. Well, maybe not stay put. Maybe get up, walk around a little bit, go get your favorite beverage. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you for joining us. And we'll catch you the next time on the Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca.